Hi, welcome. So today is our Talmudic day. How is our Talmudic caps? We've got them. Saul, you got your Talmudic cap on? Baruch Hashem. Okay.
Rabbi Fine.
Yes, my friend.
I'm going to have to leave early today because I have a peer support that starts at 1 o'clock also. So
Sure.
I'm overextended as usual. So I'm in and out.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know. Okay, let me just get it up here clearly. Okay. Let us share the screen. Okay. Do you see the Talmud in front of you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm having trouble making it larger, but I think you can, yes?
Yeah, we're able to do it ourselves. Just pull it out on the screen.
All right. So our rabbis have taught Tana Rabbanan. What do they teach? The night has 4 watches. So says Rabbi. This is Rabbi. Who is Rabbi? Anybody know?
The teacher.
Right. Rabbi means my teacher, absolutely. Who's it in reference to? A lot of teachers, right? A lot of teachers in the Mishnah. It's a reference to Reb Yehuda Hanasi, Judah the Prince, who's the author of the Mishnah, and he's called Rebbe.
Didn't we talk about this when we talked about the Shema, the different watches?
Well, we then spoke about 3 watches. Now we're going to go into an argument about 3 or 4 watches. There's an argument, as we're going to see right now. Rebbe says there's 4 watches. Actually, previously what we learned was 3 watches. Reb Nosson says 3. He argues and says that, so we're talking about the night, right? So is the night divided into 4 or 3 watches? If it's 4 watches, I mean, each watch is 3 hours. If it's 4 watches, if it's 3 watches, each watch is 4 hours, right? So what's the dispute going to be based on, folks? Anybody? How do Jews debate? How do we debate? Anybody? Any thoughts on that? Firstly, on precedent. And what's the precedent? Usually it'll be a verse in the Torah. How we understand the verse in the Torah. Let me explain an important thing over here. The sages, how they see themselves is merely to reveal the truth that is in the Torah. They're not coming to interpret. Interpretation, the word interpretation means I'm giving my take on this. Right? In other words, my personal take on it. The sages of Israel have no personal take, in the sense that they have nothing vested to see it go this way to the right or see it to go to the left. Their vested interest is only to be a servant of Hashem that is revealing through their mind, through their understanding, how they understand the words of Torah.
So it's their interpretation
Well,
of what's said.
well, yes and no. That's why I'm being careful with the words here.
Rabbi, does it mean they simply become the conduit of a certain wisdom Hashem chooses to kind of convey through them?
Yes, yes, to some degree that is exactly true, and it's based on their character personality, which means each character personality will view things the way they view it, right? But the difference is interpretation, and this is my take on it, okay? I'm going to say, these are my words. So, since I'm expounding it, I'm going to give you my interpretation of the words. Interpretation means how I interpret, so to speak, based on my whims and desires. Commentary is on how I comment on what I perceive is there. So one is trying to find the truth in the teachings through our own mind. The other one is trying to make, I'm going to interpret based on my truth. Do you get the nuance of a difference? Yeah, am I clear with that?
Can we perceive it as a different kind of filtering when there is one truth coming in, but it will be filtered differently depending on the person's mind?
Yes, exactly. It will be filtered differently, but the difference is there's no agenda. Interpretation, there's an agenda that you have, whatever the agenda. Right? Your personal preference is your agenda. Your personal likes and dislikes is your agenda. A true sage of Israel doesn't have an agenda of their own. All they want to do is to be the vehicle to be able to take the teachings and reveal the truth of that teachings. Now, in that truth, there's going to be different dimensions because there's going to be a truth from this angle. And when you look at it from this angle, there's a different way to see it. Let me give you an example. You see this book? So, whoever's looking at it from this angle is going to say it's Ein Yaakov. Whoever's going to look at it from this angle is going to say it's a black cover. Whoever's going to look at it from this angle say, oh, Daf 3. It's page 3. Who's right? Each one's right. But it's a commentary rather than interpretation. Interpretation would be like, modern art. Okay, what does this mean to you? What does this mean to you? You're the beginning point, and this is just what does it mean to you? That's what interpretation I call. Okay? Sages don't make interpretation. We make interpretation because what does this mean to me? Like, what, how does this talk to me, and what does this mean to me? Right? That's an interpretation because it's all based on you, the way you are taking that thing in. Commentary is, no. I have no agenda. I'm not looking how this talks to me. How does this tickle my fancy? How does this move me? What does this do for me? That's all. That's that's not what we call bittul, putting yourself aside to come and try to understand the divine truth of God. Now, the divine truth of God, there's different angles. So there are different, you have Beis Hillel, you have Beis Shammai, and so on and so forth. Am I making that clear? Is that concept clear? Yeah? Leah, you're shaking your head like this and like that.
Not so much, because again, opinion would be what you're saying interpretation is, because my opinion is it's an agenda. You're interpreting something. I'm interpreting what I see as I see it.
Call it opinion.
It's semantics. To me, it's semantics. I don't have...
No.
Exactly. Right. We shouldn't get into the semantics. We need to get into the concept. Exactly. I agree with you totally. So the concept is opinion is, call it opinion, fine. I'll accept that. Is based on how, my whims and desires, right? How this talks to me, right? Like modern art, for example, right? There's no commentary on that. That's just your opinion, your interpretation, it's not like you're giving yourself over to the truth of this, because, there's no truth of it. It's just person painting, right?
But Rabbi? Okay.
Yes.
Rabbi?
Yeah, go ahead, Saul.
Okay. But does that mean that in effect, if we're looking at it from a commentary point of view, there's nobody right and nobody wrong? So what we do is just by whatever people did and became the way of doing it?
So that's a good, very good point. Very good question. So I don't know if we could say there's no, there is, I wouldn't call it right and wrong, because as you said, it's, if it's part of the Torah and it is a commentary, so it is an angle, shall we say, right? It is an angle, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Every angle has its truth to it. However, the bottom line, though, must be that I can't live a life of incorporating every angle into my life.
Right.
Right. So therefore, is it 3 watches or 4 watches? When do I say the Shema to what time? And all these things, in the end, there has to be, the law has to be one definitive one. But that doesn't exclude that the other is part of the truth of Torah. It's part of the truth of Torah, but it's not the word of God that I need to follow in leading my life, because otherwise I could be cutting many pieces, right?
But it became the law because people started using it that way.
No, because
we're doing it that way?
No, because for law, there is a methodology on how we come to the law.
Okay.
So, for example, the simplest example is majority rules. So how often do we have in a Mishnah, right? We had in our first Mishnah, the Chachamim said until Chatzos that you could say the Shema, right? Rabbi Elazar said the first watch. Is the halacha according to the one Rabbi Elazar? No. It's according to the Chachamim, the sages, who were the majority of opinion. Then if it's the majority of opinion, what an opinion? I mean, comments, right? Or whatever term you want to use, we're going to get really mixed up here with our semantics. So if that's the case, then why is he there at all? If he's not the path we're following, because he's not the majority of opinion, so in a way you could say it doesn't make sense at all why his teaching is there. You know why his teaching is there? How come?
To show that there could be another way.
Because it is also the truth of God's teachings. Yeah. It's just not the path that we're taking in halachic ruling. But there's a truth in what he's saying. There's an angle, shall we say, of how he's reading the book, the Torah, that therefore he is a valid opinion, a valid, I don't want to say the word opinion, I'm afraid to say it now.
Valid commentary.
Valid commentary, there you go, Saul. Saul, you become one of the sages now. Exactly. A valid commentary, Precisely. So, and again, remember that there's so many layers of understanding, and that's what we're trying to go through over here to understand the various layers and what that angle of that teaching is coming to teach us can be something, that might incorporate other areas of life, so to speak. Okay? Excellent. Okay.
So we can learn something from everybody. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but it's more than you can learn something from everybody, but that doesn't mean everybody speaks the truth. Right. That doesn't,
No, I'm talking about these rabbis, these ones who are arguing.
Yeah, these rabbis. Yeah, okay. I didn't know you meant it only to. I didn't know that's what I thought you were making a very large statement from Pirkei Avot, Yes. Yeah, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Yeah, we can learn. And again, not just I want to not just we learn, their teaching is true. It's a word of God. It's just not it's not the path we're walking when it comes to halacha, which halacha means holech, to walk. We can only, you can't walk in this direction and walk in another direction at the same time, right? You can't go south and at the same time go north. Can't do that, right? So halacha comes from the word holech, the path that I'm taking. So I can only take one. So in the end, we have a method on how we come to the halachic path that we need to follow. Again, the simple one is majority of opinion, but there's others also. Okay? Great. Okay, now, that was all a prelude to what we're learning over here. So my question is, and we said it before, so let's go back to that. What is the since it's not about my opinion, so therefore I have to base it on jurisprudence, or even better, on a verse in the Torah. A verse in Chumash is the best, right? If that's your backing for your comment that you're making, or if not from Chumash, at least from Tanakh, from Nevi'im and Ketuvim, right? That I have to prove it from the prophets or from the holy writings. In other words, I have a source for my opinion or my comment, rather. Okay, so that's what we're going to go over here, because the idea that there's either 3 watches or 4 watches during the night is going to be based on where do we learn this idea from. It has to come from somewhere. It's not based, again, on their own understanding of things. So let's go there right now. Okay, so here we are. So again, Rabbi says, right, the Rabbanan, the Rabbi says that there's 4 watches. Reb Nosson says there's 3. What is Reb Nosson's reason? Because it's written in Judges. And Gidon and the 100 men that were with him came to the edge of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch. Right? And we are taught that tichon, which means middle, cannot be used unless something precedes and something follows it. So based on this verse, right, Gidon came with his 100 men, right? He came the middle watch. So what's his proof? Well, if that's the middle, that means there's before and after. One before, one after. And that's the middle. So it means there's 3 watches. That's how he concludes from that verse. Is that clear? Right? So then the Rebbe, who says 4 watches, how does he deal with that? The Rebbe disputes this and says, By the middle is meant one of the two middles. He says when you say middle, it just doesn't mean it wasn't the last watch or the first watch, but the middle can mean the middle of two middles, two watches in the middle. Not a proof. He says that's not a proof. Rav Nosson says, so now he counters him, right? Rav Nosson, who says there's three watches, he says, no. Is this then written in the middles? It doesn't say plural in the middles. It says it's written in the middle, one middle, not two middles, which would mean two watches and somewhere in the middle of the two watches. It says just one middle. So you can't say what you're saying. So what is Rebbe's reason? So now, okay, so what does this mean? So Rab Zarika, in the name of Rab Ami, who speaks in the name of Rab Yoshua ben Levi, said, one passage says, this is in Psalms, at midnight I constantly rise to give thanks unto thee. Midnight I constantly rise. Right? That's what King David says. I wake up, he woke up, by the harp at midnight. And what did he do? He gave praise to God. Right? Another passage says, also in Psalm, in the same Psalm 119, the famous Psalm 119, which is the longest Psalm, verse 148, my eyes are awake before the night watches. So what do we have over here? So my eyes are awake before the night watches. So there's plural watches over here. So what does that imply? That when he woke up, there were still two watches remaining in the night. So how's it possible that he woke up at midnight? If he woke up at midnight, he should be in the middle of the second watch. If there's only three watches, that means there's only one watch left. But he says he woke up in the middle of the watches. Therefore, we must say that if he woke up before midnight and there's still watches left, plural, meaning two watches, that's a proof that there are four watches. Is that clear? No? Let me explain again. Okay. So according to the story with Gidon, it seems to suggest there's three watches. But Rabbi is taking from a different place, from Tehillim, that King David woke up before midnight, and he declared there are watches, plural, remaining. If there were only three watches, that means before midnight, you're waking up in the middle, the second watch. How many watches are left? According to the opinion of three, there'd be only one watch left. But he says plural, watches. So obviously there must be two watches left. What do we see from there? There are four watches. Yeah? Good. Richard, Sarah, you got it? Eugenia got it? Saul, we're good? Karen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So we got an issue here. So now the question is, Rav Nosson, how's he going to deal with this? How's he going to understand this? Let's go back and see how he is going to interpret this verse, or give a commentary on this verse, rather. The Rav Nosson explains. We're over here. Rav Nosson explains it. Whoop. Some feedback there. Somebody want? I'm sorry, I didn't catch. Someone want to say something? Okay. So Rav Nosson explains it this way. By the statement of Rabbi Yeshua, as it is taught that Rabbi Yeshua says, it is the custom of kings to rise up on the third hour of the day, 6 hours of the night, 2 hours of the day, together make 2 night watches of 4 hours each. Rav Ashi said 1 watch and a half can also be called watches, plural. So let me explain. So he says like this. How am I going to respond to you? I'm going to respond to you as follows. Welcome, David. He says like this. This is King David talking, right? King David's king. I'm talking as a king. He's making reference about, him in reference to other kings, so to speak. He's very different than other kings. He wakes up at midnight, right? And there's a whole watch left. Plus there's a watch of the morning, right? Until the other kings get up. Other kings are, they're not Jewish kings. Or even if they're Jewish kings, they might not be true servants of God. So why does King David say watches plural? Because of the uniqueness of his divine service, that when he gets up, there's 2 watches left. What are the 2 watches? 1 watch left, right? The third watch. And then there's a watch of the morning. That's only when kings get up in the third hour of the first watch. So that's why he says plural. Okay, so you can't prove from there that the night has 4 watches rather than 3 watches, because the reference there of King David is a reference about the uniqueness of the divine service of a Jewish king versus what kings normally do. And then another way to explain this is that, remember, he wakes up before midnight, so he's in the middle of the second watch, and there's 1 watch. If you believe, Rav Nosson says there's 3 watches, so there's 1 watch left, but there's still part of the middle watch. So he says plural watches because it's not just 1 watch left, it's 1 watch and and a half left. So you can't be exacting on the term watches to mean 2 watches left, because it could be 1.5 watches, because in fact that's what is left if you understand, like Rav Nosson says, there are 3 watches during the night. So our exercise we went through over here is an exercise to understand what? That the opinion that you have is based on verses in the Torah. Each one came from a different perspective, seeing different verses that brought out a different idea of the watches, if there's 3 or 4 watches at night. Now, I must confess, I'm not certain the difference in halacha over here, because midnight will be the same for saying the Shema. So I'm not certain what difference this will make, except that there's an idea that every watch has its what's the word I'm looking? Has its unique quality of divine light that emanates at that time. Something that we spoke about previously. But I don't know if there's any, I don't see any conclusion here. I'm not certain in the Talmud elsewhere on the discussion and what the conclusion is. I have to do a little more research, but that's the end of what I know in this. Let us continue. Any questions on this? Let's continue. Okay.
I do have an odd question.
Sure, go
Oh.
ahead.
For some reason, I tend to wake up at like probably 1 o'clock in the morning every day. For some reason, I have no clue. When that happens, am I supposed to pray the Modani, or when I fall back asleep at like 3 o'clock in the morning, am I supposed to pray the Shema again? So
Very
confused when that happens.
That's a very good question. So you say Modani when you're going to get up for your, so to speak, when you're going to get up for the day. You're getting up. It happens to me also sometimes like 1 o'clock in the morning. Actually, it's interesting. Something, yeah, 1 o'clock. Actually, it's interesting. 1 o'clock right now is around midnight because of the change of the clock. So in the summertime, midnight, Jewish midnight, that is around 1 o'clock. When the clock goes back, it goes back to midnight. I'm talking about a Jewish midnight. Jewish midnight is when you take 12 hours of the day or 12 hours of the night and divide it by 12.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So midnight is not always 12 o'clock, because 12 o'clock would always be midnight if sun set at 6 o'clock and sunrise was at 6 a.m. Then 12 a.m. is going to be midnight. But if the sun sets at 8 o'clock and the sun rises at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, let's say the sun rises at 5 o'clock, right? And then from 8 to 5 is how many hours? 9 hours. Divide 9 into by 12 gives you 3/4 of an hour is an hour.
That's true.
Is that Jewish or what? So do that. So that gives you 6. So midnight, listen to here, folks. You heard it here first. So midnight, 6 times 45 minutes is an hour and a half. An hour and a half, that's 3 hours, 4.5 hours. So 4.5 hours from 8 o'clock, it's going to be 12:30. It's going to be midnight. Based on that, on what I just said, right? That's when midnight will be, the mid of the night. Because that's what midnight means, right? Midnight
Right.
doesn't mean 12 o'clock. Mid of the night. That's going to change. Got it? Pretty fascinating.
What watch is that?
Huh?
What watch is that? 12:30.
Oh, well, so that will depend. If there's 3 watches, so then it's in the middle of the second watch. If there's 4 watches, then it's going to be in exactly in the middle between the first 2 and the last 2.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Now, just to give you a little glimpse into some of the meaning behind this. The first half of the night, the more gvura is in the world. Gvura means power. Power meaning judgment. There's greater judgment in the world. The first half of the night till midnight. From midnight, there's more chesed. It's now leaning towards more kindness. Therefore, the first part of the night, right, the first half of the night, we're actually careful about not learning Torah that is only the written word. You need to have oral commentary with it. So you shouldn't read Chumash on just without Rashi, for example. How come? How come? How come, folks? Because the written word is an expression of chesed, of kindness. The oral word is an expression of gevura. Leah, you look very enlightened.
I never heard that.
Interesting. That is so
Isn't the
interesting.
word of Rabbanim more or less stringent than the Bible?
I'm not certain because of the, I'm not exactly, no, it's.
In other words, the
Chesed,
oral Torah.
chesed. What is chesed? Indiscriminate giving. The written word is it's an indiscriminate giving of God and his infinite wisdom. It's like infinite giving, so to speak. The written word is in the sense, it's an expression of chesed of Hashem. The written word, that's the written word. The oral is the fire of God, which is gvura. Mipi gvura. It comes from the mouth of gvura. Mouth is oral. The oral Torah is an expression of gvura. How so? Because the written word is got infinite explanation, as infinite form of giving. Gvura, the words that we say are very delineated, are very precise to give us, like a word is a container that contains. So it gives us a very delimited, right? Is that clear?
So can you not say that the oral Torah is more stringent? That is the Rabbanim who, could you say that it's more stringent than the?
Well, it is. It is. It's true what you're saying. It's more because they put a fence around the Torah.
They protected the Torah, right? So it was more stringent.
But I'm talking about even before they put the fence of the Torah. I'm talking about their commentary on the Torah.
Okay, thank you.
About their commentary, not about the fence.
Thank you.
That's already rabbinic law. I'm
Right.
talking about the oral law that is part of the biblical law.
Thank you.
Right? It's the understanding of it's a biblical explanation, right?
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. So that is delineated. That is coming from, one is coming from Chachma. So the written word is called father. Very Chachma, it's the seed. The father gives a seed in creating the child. The written word is a seed, right? The oral Torah is the mother. Father is the right, mother is the left. Father is Chachma, mother is Bina. Father, from Chachma comes Chesed, indiscriminate giving. Men are very indiscriminate in their giving. Even the very seed that the man gives to the birth of a child is very indiscriminate because there's so many of them, so much seed. What does a woman give? One egg. I mean, usually, right? One egg. Very discriminate. Extremely discriminate. That's the left side. Is that clear? Yeah?
Why the left side? Why the left side?
Bina is the left. Bina is the discriminating of an idea. Chachma is the seed of the idea. Then you have to discriminate it and bring it into a length, breadth, and depth, just like as the mother takes the seed and brings it now, the fetus, into the length, breadth, and depth. So she does that with an idea. She does that in the fetus. That's the left side, Bina. From Bina, you get Gvura, being very discriminating. Sarah was very discriminating about her family. should not include Ishmael. Avram, lo yichya Ishmael lefanenu. So be that he should live before us and before God and be part of the family, because he's chesed, he's indiscriminate, not in a bad way, in a good way. You wanted to include him and incorporate him. Sarah is very discriminating. She's Bina, she's Gvura. Is that clear? So we have in the Torah these two elements. The written word is Chachma, the seed that has infinite potential. It's chesed, divine kindness, in the sense that it's indiscriminate, I don't know the right word, indiscriminate here, but infinite potential of how it could be seen, how it could come out. As the many different angles you could, the same thing. Comes the oral Torah, and Rabbi is very discriminating. He says 4 watches. He says 4 watches. Rabbi Nosson says 3 watches. That's Gvura. That's the oral Torah that's coming now to take from the teachings and to bring it into a discriminating thought or point of view. Not their own point of view, but the Torah is coming to espouse. Now, let's go further. Let's go back now. So I said that the first part of the night is more Gvura, left side. The second half of the night is more Chesed. By the way, what's midnight? Compassion. Both Gvura and Chesed coming together is compassion. What happened at midnight? God had compassion on the firstborn Jewish boys and passed over their home and only killed the Egyptians, even though they weren't truly worthy, completely worthy of it. But God's compassion was shining then upon Jewish people. But the first part of the night is Gvura. So therefore, Gvura means judgment. Discriminating is judgment. So therefore, we have to be careful that we learn the parts of the Torah that can be discriminating to affect good judgment. The oral Torah. So we don't say Tehillim at night, for example, except after midnight, because that's Chesed. We don't say Chumash without oral teachings. So you don't read Chumash unless you're doing it with Rashi, for example, as Rashi is the oral Torah. Why? Because the light of God that's shining then is more Gvura. And therefore, it's not the Chesed, pure Chesed time. After midnight, we say Tehillim. That's why when it comes to Slichos, we do it after midnight. All the shuls that do it early are getting confused. Slichos. That's a time of judgment. It's not the time of Chesed. So you got to do it after midnight. Same thing as Hoshana Rabbah, there's a custom to say Tehillim after midnight. You can't do it before. Is that clear? Leah, you're talking to the wall.
No, it's very clear. Thank you.
Sorry.
Well,
I thought you're not supposed to say Tehillim Bichlal at night.
yeah, I mean, how many of us are up after midnight? If you're up after midnight, you can say Tehillim. You are, okay. So you and King David. You wake up like King David by the harp. midnight.
Happens a lot.
Yes. So that's just some of the ideas of what this is talking about, right? Now the watches has got a different angle to it, and I don't have a complete clarity on it. I need to look more into it.
And 20 minutes later, I still don't understand the point of the watches personally. I understand the last 15, 20 minutes you were talking about, which I could interpret a bit much easier. But the 3 watches and 4 watches, I'm not sure. I'm not Talmudic, and I don't know why we're supposed to be learning, why we learn that.
Well, what we learned, let's make sure we have a clarity. What we learned about those watches was based on the understanding from the verses of the Torah, right? Now, what's behind all of that? What's the meaning? We didn't get into that. So you're already. So all you need to understand from that part of the teachings was that the argument is based on verses in the Torah and how they're to be understood. They both have different verses. Each one are, sort of more citing a bit with them, but each one answered the other one, and therefore, we didn't come to a conclusion. What is the content or the significance? We didn't get into that. The only significance we got into is now the difference between oral Torah, written Torah, the beginning of the first half of the night and the second half of the night. Now, if the first half of the night is made up of 2 watches or 1.5 watches, and the second, that's a debate, and that's a different point. But what we have at least understanding in the difference of the first half of the night and the second half of the night is at least gives us a perspective on the concept of that there's things happening. Right? They are not just happenstance ideas. But more on this to come. Any questions, any comments? I'm over my time.
Thank you very much. Very
we
good.
got it.
Very
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I'm tired.
That's good. After you learn Torah, that you exercise your brain, you have the right to be tired and go eat something so you rejuvenate yourself.
Thank you. I'm leaving.
You're
Goodbye.
leaving. Don't leave.
Goodbye. Goodbye. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. All right, folks. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
Rabbi. Bye.
Richard, Eugenia, Leah, and
Thank you.
David, Leslie, David. I hope you got it. The last part, I'm sure you got because that was it. We segued into another idea. Karen and Lily and Leslie, of course. Thank you all. Be well.